Just this question I always had in my mind. What if instead of c6, why don't black play here bishop g7 and after bishop e3, let's say c6,
Okay.
and after queen d2, why they don't play here h5?
My pleasure to have over here a very good friend of this channel. You already know Grandmaster Avetik from Chess Mood. And he told me, I still don't believe him, but he told me he wanted to learn more about the Pirc Defense. And I'm about to get cocky because I'm here like, oh, I'm teaching a Grandmaster, my opening. Uh, so I'll do my best. I'm pretty sure he's going to have questions that maybe you guys have never had before because it's at a different level, right? So he's going to look at the opening differently. He's going to dissect it. And like I always say, the more you know about chess, the easier it is to learn openings. Because for many of us, we learn an opening and we're like, oh, I got to memorize this move because they told me to do it after this move. But for someone who knows chess, they see this move like bishop c5, and not only do they have to memorize it, but they already make sense out of the move. Oh, it goes here because it's controlling the diagonal or it's activating the bishop. So it's easier to remember because they're already making connections and making sense of the moves. So, anyways, let's see how it goes. I'm prepared to get destroyed with his questions and not having a lot of answers, but if that's the case, I
Well,
can always come back to him
well,
after.
like, first of all, thank you very much for this, and hello everyone who listens us and joins this lesson. And I will not ask too many grandmaster level questions because personally I want this to learn. I really want to learn this, not for playing in some tournament. Well, I'm a retired chess player, but I always thought that Pirc is a great opening for playing against lower rated players. So you avoid theory and you just get fighting position. But also I was afraid to play it because I might just get destroyed from it. But if I knew the first 10 moves, I would be okay because then it's fighting position. And even if engine at some point will say white has advantage, I would never care because engine is always saying white has a center and white has advantage. So it kind of overvalues, and engine doesn't understand the practical, what is word practical. And there are lots of positions, I think, in King's Indian that it says white has advantage, but practically it's black has big advantage. So I think the same is happening with Pirc. So this is one of my interest was around Pirc. And have you ever seen the TV concept?
TV concept? No.
So take this is 6 BC6. So
Uh-huh.
when you take, yeah. So what is black's plan here? Yeah. What's next? This I called TV concept. What is TV concept? There is this
It's clicking now, but tell me. You,
part
you explain it
in
better.
Yeah, partly it's like bishop g7, it's a great bishop, but like white's great bishop is limited with the knight on f6. So I call this like TV concept when like the older person at the family is watching a TV with the remote control in her hands, and then the grandchild comes and stays in front of her. And you're like, hey, dear, I'm watching a TV. You are sitting you are staying in front of me. So now the bishop g7 and knight f6, they fight together. The bishop says, knight, please move from here. I'm working there on this diagonal. And the knight says, what do you want from me? I'm staying here. Great. So often, if you can exchange the knight on f6 with the knight opponents, or you can remaneuver it somewhere, then all of the pieces happy. So here, one of the main maneuvers is knight d7, knight c5. Also, the bishop a6 come from there, rook from b8, and then all the pieces are suddenly very happy.
Exactly.
So this one when white played d5 and gave the light square bishop, totally understandable why black is better, so we can move on.
Exactly. No, and I wanted to, now that you said that, it's important when you mention things like the TV concept because that's something you could apply to any opening, any possession. Whenever you
Mm.
have this situation, I got a good piece, but it's blocked by another piece of mine. Well, let me apply what Avetik said. So, and that's what I'm really trying to tell people. It's all about understanding the ideas behind the moves and the plans, not just memorizing without knowing why. And by the way, here we're going to talk about something else in the future. What you said about the TV concept, I call it the dark square strategy in this specific opening because the point is
Mhm.
we are always fighting for these dark squares in the center. And part of it is because we start with d6. So we immediately control these dark squares. So This knight d7 is thematic because we want to reroute it to those dark squares, and we see this in the King's Indian defense as well. But anyways,
Mhm.
so this is the idea with knight c6. Now, I still don't like knight c6 here unless I really have to. My preferred always has been bishop g4, even better than knight e4. I understood always that knight e4, the central fork was good, but I felt like the position was simplified too much. And if I'm playing for a win, I didn't really want that. So I would rather play bishop g4, that it maintains this hyper modern approach. I'm really undermining the defender of the pawn. And now I really like this knight c6 now, developing with a tempo. And I guess it has to do with my foundation that I always learn these principles, develop with a tempo, don't move the same piece twice. So knight c6 now always was more appealing to me. And of course, now the same concept. If they just advance, this is music to my ears. Look at the bishop, nice squares for the knight. So what the white pieces should do instead is bishop e3. They develop a piece, they maintain the center intact. And now we could do what we fight for so much in the King's Indian defense, in the Pirc defense, which is the e5 strike. And this is full hyper modern approach. It's not that we don't believe we have to control the center. We do, but we just want to do it whenever we want. So I don't want to play move one, e4, e5. I want to put pressure on your pawns first, try to create some weaknesses. If you do a good job defending, fine. Finally, I'm going to put the pawn on e5. And then this is my way to claim a share of the center that is so important. Of course, you could always have more fun and then do what you said before, move the knight out of the way and put pressure here. A lot of my beginner students love this because as beginners, we typically tend to not realize these things, and the white pieces might not realize it, and then boom, you got a free pawn. But if they do defend it, well, you could still finally play pawn to e5.
Right. Another question I have: if when you played knight c6,
Right here.
so what if before bishop e3, the
Uh,
previous move instead of bishop e3, e5? If what if white plays here knight e2,
92
and if e5
to keep the
c3,
flexibility.
like if they
Ah,
yeah, if
okay,
e5
okay.
c3 try to keep the center, how do you
Wh-
do this here?
Where
Knight
you
d7, bishop e3,
97 automatically. What was the other move you said?
bishop e3. Just asking because like
But
bishop
you
e3,
said
yeah, white
okay,
can.
yeah, 97. Oh, but here I have a tactic. I have actually gotten this in games.
Oh, take
Um,
a 95. Yeah, I see. I
yeah,
see.
yeah,
This
yeah,
is important tactic.
exactly. Yeah,
Otherwise, it would be, yeah, got it.
yeah. So this again, this is not something I just came up with. This is something I've learned from before. So knowing this system allows me to also know the typical tactics, and that's something I added in the course. I didn't do it, and people were like, "You should do it folder or a chapter with typical tactics or and typical plans, the typical ideas." And when they first said it, I'm like, "Come on, guys, can you just do that on your own?" But then when I did it, I see the value in it because they already can. Number
Yep,
one, they
yep,
could go
yep,
over it and say, "Am I missing something?" No, no, no. Everything here I already know. But also, it helps you reinforce these ideas. Like this, it was not
yep.
my tactical genius. It was just something I knew from before when you said it. All right. Any
Everything
question?
is so clear so far.
Okay. Everything clear. Now, the only thing that we have then left to do is to go over the really critical ones, which are number one, let's talk about I call it the 150 attack, even though it's not exactly, but anything that is aggressive, like opposite side, they prioritize the queen side. We give them the same treatment. I told you earlier, I used to play against this f3, bishop e3, just do the same thing, and I'll get destroyed with this crazy attack. So what I do and what I tell my students to do is whenever you see any crazy attacks, any indications of it, if they don't prioritize king side, most likely they're thinking of castle and queen side with that crazy opposite side attack. So if they do bishop e3, if they do f3, if they do this move that someone I know recommends, bishop f4, we just give them the same treatment, which is c6. And in my mind, it all started like, okay, if you're doing f3, which is a leverage pawn to play g4 and f4, well, I'm going to do the same thing. And the most important thing is, without my king going to the king side, your plan is not going to be so effective because who are you attacking there? I'm not even going to castle there. And this is finally when I started to do this, I finally started to breathe because especially at the level that I play, my students play, people just have this idea. They're like, oh, you know what? If you play the modern defense, the Pirc defense, those hyper modern just go bishop e3, queen d2, castle, and attack with the pawns. That's all they know. And guess what? They do it mechanically, even if you don't castle there. So it's very, very comfortable for us to attack on the queen side and our king still in the center, many times being safe. For example, let's say they continue with this. I go pawn to b5. I'm not doing anything on the king side. You go queen d2. Now I go knight b to d7. Flexible move, trying to bring it to the queen side, queen a5, and so on. If you go bishop h6, typically when I play the fianchetto and they do this, the advice is don't take it because then the queen gets there and it's really annoying. Well, here I'm going to take it because I'm not even going to castle there. After I play something like queen b6 or queen a5, let's say queen a5, not only am I already putting pressure on this side, and most likely you're not going to castle there, but if things get ugly, I can always just play bishop b7 and go queen side, assuming it gets really bad for me in the center or the king side. So in essence, this is the idea for that I follow, that I like my students to follow. Opposite side or um, aggressive attack, just play c6, followed by pawn to b5.
So, like this system with c6 when black delay with bishop g7 short castle,
Hmm.
I started to play this perk myself because I was afraid about this attack and get mated. But there was a game where my friend Andreasian Zaven, then he was just 17, he played against Mamedyarov and got crushed with white because Mamedyarov played this. He delayed bishop g7. He just left it there and played knight d7, b5, exactly what you showed.
Hmm.
Zaven played bishop h6. He got the queen on h6 without doing anything there, and he got crushed in the queen side. So this is the variation that I loved very much and started to try in some blitz games. And yeah, with just this knowledge, I would play against IM level even.
Absolutely.
Just this question I always had in my mind: what if instead of c6, why don't black play here bishop g7? And after bishop e3, let's say c6,
Okay.
and after queen d2, why they don't play here h5? My
Okay.
idea with h5 is to stop bishop h6, to stop g4, and also I don't castle, I just keep the king on e8, and then I play your plan. Knight d7, b5, knight b6, but also I will have this bishop on g7. This is just theoretical question I had in my mind, but I had never had an expert to ask why not h5. And I
Well,
even didn't dive myself with engine or games because it seems very logical, but never seen it.
no,
So
no,
do you know answer on this?
you know what? The only thing I can tell you is because in my experience, I just said, you know what? How do I deal with this c6? Did stick to c6. I see Mama Jarov doing it later. I'm like, this is the way to go. I didn't even look for anything else. Now h5, the only experience I have with it is later. Like for example, if let's say they go, I want to say castle, and I go with b5. Oh, yeah, I have to play b5. Let's say they go h4 now. Like this is whenever I see this h4, that's when I play my h5, and this is my way to stop everything on the king side. But I only do it as a reaction to h4. I never thought of doing it prophylactically before they even
Hmm.
attempt to do it. Because you're right, they could play g4, and this is the other thing. They could play g4, um, and then play g5. So even here, I would try to do h5, and then if they do g5, then this is sort of sealed in my mind. The king side is already sealed. I feel better
Yep.
about it.
Yep.
And you have to play a 4 or 5, but then it gives me time to create counterplay. So I always thought as a reaction to their attack, never thought of it as a prophylaxis. So this is going to be homework number two
Second
for
homework.
me. Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
I'm also
perfect.
not sure it's c6, maybe even a6 we could do. But if c6 was your favorite, fine. Just play bishop g7, h5, your system without castle. Keep the king in the center. Just on top of that, have the bishop on g7 that might help us on the queen side.
Exactly,
Okay, got it.
exactly. In your case specifically, your recommendation, I don't know if you have already, if you have encountered this, or if you recommend something
Yeah,
against
of course,
this.
of course. This was C6 is still the best. The only challenge here is that when white didn't play f3 and they play queen d2, sometimes they are playing knight f3 and e5, which is very difficult to challenge. It
Yes.
is
So basically, they keep it flexible with knight f3, right? So knight b
just
to
knight bd7
d7.
first, and then you keep in your mind because now if they go long
Mm,
castle, there is one difference will be now you can play b5, and if e5, you have b4. This is important move.
yes, makes sense. Makes sense.
Now you might ask, what's the difference? Yeah, why then there
Well,
you could not do that thing? The difference is if
go
you
ahead. Go
did
ahead.
this b5 without, like now you play b4 and everything is okay for you,
Hmm.
because after ef6, bc3, queen c3, you take knight f6.
You don't.
You
You
don't
don't.
care about c6 pawn because it's opposite castles and you are going to open the b and c file and mate the opponent.
That makes
If
sense.
you had this variation with the knight on b8, you had to take ef6 and ruin your pawn structure.
And open the file
That's
towards the
why.
king.
Yep. That's
Very,
why I think knight bd7
very good
is
point.
most critical. But still, okay. Then we will dive to some theoretical positions. But bishop f4, I understand. Let's
No,
go to your other
but I'm
variations.
glad. But I'm glad that you brought this up because that's a difference, a key difference that I didn't mention between bishop e3 and bishop e4. Because I'm thinking if the bishop is on e3, e5 is not so annoying, right? Even with my pawn on b5.
Yeah. Bishop f4. The whole idea is that white is mixing this idea with queen d2, bishop
Ah.
h6, and
I mean, right now bishop g5.
yeah.
No, this is the Byrne. So okay, and I think I know where you're going, but in the Byrne, I just play bishop g7. Yeah, I don't want to mess up my pawn structure so early, unless it's
Really?
something.
Is it bad?
I I don't like it. I don't like it.
Okay.
And not to mention, the main line is bishop g7. Now, maybe you're not going. Maybe this is not what you had in mind, but a question that I get asked a lot is, well, what if I go queen d2 now, and then castle and f3 and so on? Didn't you? Because I always tell my students, delay everything on the king side when you see the aggressive with bishop e3 and f3. And they tell me, well, if they play bishop g5, bishop g7, queen d2, didn't you already invest this? And the truth is that it's not a big deal. I prefer when they do bishop e3 to not even invest that move because I know eventually they get here and we trade it. But it's not a big a deal. That tempo is just not big a deal. So against Byrne, I just play bishop g7. I really don't like when they take it.
Let me ask you this question. If you don't like bishop f6, why don't you play knight bd7 first?
Um, right here. Wait,
Before
bishop
bishop
g.
g7. So I
Yeah, yeah.
want to save you that tempo. I mean, if they go with queen d2 and long castle, now we can play c6, b5,
And you sort of
and
transpose,
without
right?
bishop g7. Yeah, I don't want to waste the tempo because tempo for me it's a lot.
Especially if it's a sharp position, right?
Yeah, personally, I would probably not afraid with the bishop f6 because after ef6, I love bishop here and always there will be f5, open the position. But
Hmm.
in case you don't like, I understand you don't want it. So why not just knight bd7 and then c6,
And it's more
b5?
flexible. I'm really gonna look into this knight b to d7 just to save that time, just to save that tempo.
If you want to save time, I think like after c6, bishop f6, ef6, black is more than better, more than okay then. So if you are
C6.
not playing c6 just because of bishop f6, after bishop f6, ef6 with this bishop pair, no way black is worse.
You're right. You're right.
This
You're
bishop
right.
g7, f5 always will be a threat. There will be cases when even if you can sacrifice the opponent, then with bishop pair you will get compensations. So this position, like what is white's plan to move forward? You never have a 45, you can never push your pawns. Black is very solid and they have your favorite counter blow always. Imagine
Hmm.
they are also playing now bishop g7, queen b6 attacking the b2, f5 attacking the d4. There will be so many dangers here without this dark square bishop for white.
You're right.
Um, there is no way black is worse here.
That's a good
So
point.
the only thing is you should be careful with c6. I think is, well, I didn't understand what exactly you play after bishop g5, bishop g7, f4. So if you play c6, maybe there is a difference. Maybe with f4 is the difference. By the way, what do you play after bishop
But
g7,
no, you know
f4?
what?
What's the way to play then?
I think it's not gonna do much because we typically do the same thing, C6, B5. Now, the way that I
Bishop g7, f4, you do c6, yeah?
said that again.
If f4 here, what's your move?
Oh, I just
c6
castle. No, I just
anyway.
castle. No, I just castle. Because
And with the plan,
say that again.
what's the plan then?
Oh, the
How do you
plan.
play the
Yeah,
center?
that's a good point. So from here, I'm gonna go with C6 and B5.
c6,
That
b5 anyway you do. Okay, so if you
exactly.
anyway do, yeah, then you can do
So I
c6
think
maybe.
C6 is gonna be a good addition, anyways. Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay. Okay. And what do you play against f4? This was very
The Austrian.
that always yeah, was sounding to me like, oh, I will get mated there.
Well, here's the thing. With the Austrian, I always recommend it, and I actually played it for a long time. So bishop g7, of course, we know these e5s are a little bit premature. We don't have to worry about them, right? And you could, from here, you could just take, or you could play what I played for a long time, which is just knight f to d7 and just leave those pawns. This is what we want. We want him to throw a punch, and then we counter attack, right? Then you could continue with c5 and things like that. Now, um, the main line, which is knight f3, I always recommended pawn to c5, and to me it was always very attractive because I'm getting possession from the dragon Sicilian, right? And of course, this is pretty straightforward if they go queen d takes c5, queen a5. With that said, I had there was like 2 years ago. We had an event here in Miami, and we had a lot of elite players like Magnus and Aronian. And I played a blitz game against Aronian, and he played this line exactly. And he goes queen d3. Now, of course, I forgot the theory at the moment, and I was just playing Aronian. So I'm just looking at Aronian, and they're like, I'm falling in love with Aronian. Oh, I'm playing Aronian. He just destroyed me, right? But it was interesting. He just knew it by heart. He just got to this position, and boom, he destroyed me. But this in itself is a position that I like. I like a lot. So queen c5. The reason why I decided to give up on it is it could get so complicated, especially if they get into these e5 lines. Um, I'm always happy with it. I have my lines prepared, but it gets so tricky. Sometimes, even if you go back here, they could continue with some bishop c4, h4, h5. And again,
Yeah.
you're gonna be okay if you know it. But the
Whoops.
thing is,
Dangerous.
yeah, it's dangerous. And the thing is, I had to spend Avetik. I had to spend hours before the tournaments to review these lines. And I figured, you know what? I don't want to do this anymore because then I get to the tournament. I get to play probably 3, 4 games as black, and nobody plays this. So I memorized it. I brushed up on it for 2, 3 hours when I could have used that time to do tactics or do something else. So what I'm doing, what I recommended in the course, and what I'm doing myself. Like whatever I put in the course, I'm playing it myself. And 10 moves in, then I just play chess in the middle game and end game, right? Well, I'm just going with the main line, which is castle,
Short castle, you did, yeah?
just castle. And then in an effort to make it simple, we go back to the same thing. If they go bishop d3, which is actually the main line, I remind people about the romance between these two guys. So knight c6, I was always afraid of it because of d5, and I'm like, where do we go next? Well, we have the same idea with knight b4. And from here, the pawn is already on d5. So easy to remember. Well, I need to challenge it with a side pawn, just like we learned in the classical variation. So if you already go through the course, you digested the classical variation. When you get here, oh, it's easy to remember the ideas and just look at the toolbox. What plan do I use, right? So that's if they play d5. Of course, I've played it myself lately a lot. Nobody plays d5. So what you might get is something like just castling. And then we just go with e5, just strike the center. And this to me is so satisfying to have that powerful center. Like it looks like you can never play e5, and then boom, all of a sudden you strike it. And that's all. We just want to turn this powerful center they have into a weaknesses, into a bad pawn structure. And of course, we could go over every single line, but I think the most critical would be, I guess, the most logical taking with the f pawn first. I don't know which one would worry
Mhm.
you, but of course we
Yeah.
take back.
And d5.
Then if they, yeah, in d5, taking here another move that I mean, my first impression is always my first reaction is knight g4, and then you get it back. But even knight takes and queen d4 is always in the air,
I
right?
also saw knight g4. That's why I discounted d5.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah, no, exactly. It's just very natural to do that. But then typical ideas is this 95, queen d4. Now,
Mhm.
if they go 95, boom, the same idea. Oh, I already saw this in the classical. So you throw the knight in the center. Taking it, okay, this is already pretty nice for us. We get not only the semi open file, but we get the ideas with c6, queen b6. It gets so nice. We get all of this dynamic play. If, of course, they take on e5, this is very well known in King's Indian and all of these positions. If you do that, then I could just take on e4, and I'm going to collect on e5. Probably you could take on d5 too. I don't know. I like e4
Mhm.
better. Or you could even play queen e7, and then you get it back. The point is you're gonna get it back. But even with 94, this is already pretty nice position for us. And there's
Mhm.
actually a tactic that I put in the course where I've played this, and you get this very natural move, bishop a6, which is already losing after queen h4. So yeah, so this is as far as the Austrian. I'm just castling bishop d3, knight c6. For myself, for my counter blowers, definitely I want to keep it simple, not go into detail like you said. I don't want to go lines into
Got
move
it.
number 20. But one thing is for
So in your
certain.
course, I can find more, yeah, more about knight c6 and how you go deeper
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
against each
exactly.
move.
Again, I don't think for
Got
you
it.
it's going to be
Okay, I
that
will check it
useful.
out later then.
You feel free to check it out. But I don't think for you it's going to be that useful because everything is up to move number 10. And after that, we just play chess,
That's
right?
enough. That's what I want. I
There you
don't
go.
want number 20. I just want to not get mated and play. So I just not. This is like move six probably. Yeah, this one.
This,
Yeah.
yes,
So
absolutely.
this is all I need to know. Just four more moves. Do I play knight c6 or I play knight a6? Do I play e5 or how do I play? This is all I need. I don't need more than 10 moves.
I agree. I agree with you. Same thing here. And you know, again, for you that you have way more knowledge and experience than us, you need even less. Like I heard, so I read somewhere that the less someone knows about middle game and end game, the more they want to memorize openings.
Of
But
course, of course. That's
right,
very deep thing what you said. Where did you find it? It's very deep
I
thing.
don't even know. I know it's. I know I read it or I heard it somewhere, and it stayed because it's true. So yeah, for you, it's
Exactly.
gonna.
Robert, also, this is the thing very typical to talented players. Talented players, they don't learn openings. They don't want to learn because everything is easy for them. I will play these positions. They talented. They understand where would pieces stay, and they are confident they will outplay opponent in the counter in the middle game. So they are just this is enough. I always had this challenge when I was working with talented players. I would show them some variations, and they would enough. I was like, no. Here you should know, otherwise you would get mated. They say enough. The counter, the opposite of that. If someone is less confident in their chess skills, they want more until move 30, until move 35, checking with engine. So indeed, your advice to improve the middle game, to be more confident in the opening and then learn less in the openings, that's a good way.
Very nice, man. Thank you so much for your time,
Yep. Thank you too.
and
Thank you too, my friend.
we will definitely keep in
Thanks
touch.
too.
And I'm always telling my students check out Chess Mood. Great content. You guys are always update adding more, and you're doing a blog, and you're always sending tips and by email. So it's a great community that you have created. I have a lot of students who already use it, and they're like, "Hey, I'm cheating on you with this friend of yours from Europe. I don't know where he lives, but I'm cheating. I'm cheating." I'm like, "Hey, you spend time where you need to spend it. Right now, that's a great resource to be at. If you need something from me for my videos, you come back. But what you guys already have is like it's like having a team of grandmasters just preparing your chess and coaching you. So congrats of what you have created,
Thank you very much.
and keep going at it.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, my friend.